I will tell you, when I think you mentioned I'm still the only woman ever to present the Lombardi Trophy. I remember being in the production meeting. I mean, you can imagine what they're like for a Super Bowl, right? It goes all around the world and quite a few people. It's the biggest thing a network does. We were sitting there and Ted Shaker said, okay, now let's talk about the post game. So, it's embarrassing to even repeat. We're going to have Lesley Visser present the Lombardi Trophy. Now, Terry Bradshaw is sitting there, and Brent Musburger is sitting there, and Greg Gumbel is sitting there, and Jim Nantz, and everybody might me too. Our mouths are like, what? But
you could have given Terry Bradshaw your autograph at that moment.
Later, because I worked with him quite a bit, he said, my autograph was worth so much more than whatever crap you were going to put in the Boston Globe.
Benztown president Dave Chachi Dennis loves radio and all of his radio friends.
Hey, Chachi.
Hey, everybody.
Because Chachi loves everybody.
She's a trailblazer who's broken numerous barriers in sports media, and she's still going strong in her 52nd year as a journalist. She's been inducted into 10 different Hall of Fames, almost always as a first. The first woman enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The first woman to report from a Super Bowl sideline. The first to cover the NFL as a beat. And the first and only woman to handle the Lombardi Trophy presentation at the Super Bowl. She was the first female sportscaster to carry an Olympic torch, the first woman on ABC's Monday Night Football, and the first to appear on network broadcasts of the World Series, the Final Four, the NBA Finals, and the Super Bowl. In 2020, she became the first woman ever to receive the Sports Emmy Lifetime Achievement Award, joining legends like Jim McKay and John Madden. And in 2024, she made history again as the first woman to win the Vin Scully Award for Excellence in Broadcasting. Her story started back in 1974 at the Boston Globe when she earned the Carnegie Foundation grant. Back then, her press credentials literally read, "No women or children in the press box." There were no ladies' rooms, no equal access. So she did post-game interviews in a parking lot. Since then, she's reported from the fall of the Berlin Wall, covered a young Yao Ming in communist China, and interviewed everyone from Mark Cuban to Misty Copeland. She's been honored as a Muhammad Ali Daughter of Greatness and a Billie Jean King Outstanding Journalist. A graduate of Boston College and an author of the powerful memoir, Sometimes You Have to Cross When It Says Don't Walk. She's inspired generations of journalists, athletes, and fans. Please welcome Lesley Visser. Lesley, thank you so much for joining me.
Dave, I think people must be so sick of me already after hearing that.
Not a chance. That bio is so incredibly, well, it's just incredible. And what you have accomplished in your career truly is Hall of Fame worthy. 10 Hall of Fames. I am so excited to dig into this. And at the Library of American Broadcasting's Giants of Broadcasting and Electronic Arts annual luncheon, you were inducted as a giant with David Muir, Gary Sandy, Rick Dees, and several others. So congratulations. Tell me a little bit about growing up.
Well, before we get to that, I am so honored for this honor. I mean, I looked back and, the people from CBS who've been honored, and my boss for 22 years at CBS was Sean McManus, of course, son of the great Jim McKay, who I got to do the Triple Crown with, who a lot of people don't know. Jim McKay, his real name was McManus, and he was in Baltimore. They made him change his name to McKay, but he loved horse racing. That was, I think, probably his favorite sport. And I had the privilege of working with him. My story was, my family moved a lot. My dad grew up in Amsterdam, was not Jewish, but under the Nazis, and, really a tough way to grow up. His family got him out, maybe a year before Holland was liberated. Holland was invaded in 40, liberated in 45. And my mom was from the Berkshires, and I was just one of those kids. I have a great older brother, Chris, who loves sports, but I was just one of those kids who, other kids love dance or poetry or singing. I just loved sports.
And were you an athlete yourself, or did you like more? Were you already at that point wanting to do and call and write about sports?
No, I always wanted to be a sports writer. And I was way before Title IX. It was, my older brother started taking me to Fenway when I was about 8 years old. And, I think baseball, we just saw from this World Series just how charming and wonderful and the pitching and the defensive plays. But, I was scoring 6 to 4 to 3, the best play in baseball, by the way, when I was like 8 years old, and Fenway Park is so iconic that I just, it's so weird when you work with the highest class of athletes that I remember once we were at dinner, I was on the NFL Today on CBS, an iconic program, 3 different times. And one night at dinner, it was like Dan Marino and Shannon Sharp and Boomer Esiason and myself. And they were all telling stories, about, and then somebody said, now, Lesley, you played high school sports. Well, you think I wanted to talk about my little field hockey experience? They're Hall of Famers, every guy I'm looking at. So, yeah, I did. I played sports, my whole life, but nothing compared to anything that I've worked with.
Boston is such an incredible sports town, and Fenway, it doesn't get any more charming as a stadium than Fenway. So what a beautiful place to grow up and to be able to experience. Was that around Yaz? Was he around that era?
Sure. But yeah. I actually, for the Red Sox of my childhood were really terrible. Our manager's name was Pinky, and, we always were near the bottom of the AL East. But you do grow up hating the Yankees. That's like in our DNA. Of course, and I was there for all of them. I was there for Bucky Bleeping Dent. And then I was there for Buckner when it went through his legs.
Sure.
Moon off Wakefield, which practically killed us. So I was an honorable mentor for women they wanted to follow in these footsteps. I think I was authentic for them.
And obviously very intelligent. You get accepted into Boston College, and Boston being such an incredible school town to begin with. And you get a job at the newspaper. So what was your first gig at the newspaper, the student paper?
Well, I'd written sports at Boston Globe at Boston College, and I don't know if you're familiar with them, but I think many of your listeners would along the way. My editor was Mike Lupica, maybe the most confident/arrogant young person ever. Like, we were in college and he was telling Yaz to retire. But the Carnegie Corporation, the Carnegie Foundation had an opportunity where they gave 20 scholarships to women who wanted to go into jobs that were 95% male, which was all sports writing. So, but I think a woman from Johns Hopkins got it for ophthalmology, a woman from Michigan got it for archaeology, and I got it for sports writing. And it was such a blessing. The Boston Globe sports section always was voted number 1 in the country. I think collectively we're in about 30 halls of fame from the group I went through with. And so I went to the Globe, and then they made me the first woman to cover the NFL as a beat in the mid-'70s. And honestly, Dave, it was, a little bit terrifying. I was at this great sports section in the golden age of newspapers. We'd published the Pentagon Papers. I remember when Nixon resigned, there was a 60-foot cake in the newsroom that just said "The End." It was a very, very a big, muscular, liberal Northeast paper at the time.
It's one of the most prestigious. My wheelhouse is really radio, but I'm assuming that working at a paper is much like the radio or television business, that you're aspiring to get into the bigger markets, the bigger stations, and so forth. And so to work at a Boston Globe, I got to believe that's top 10 newspaper in the country, and to get that gig at such an early age, that's.
I didn't have another. I went right from Boston College to the number 1 sports section in America, but the guys were great because they were all very secure. Peter Gammons was the best ever at baseball. Bud Collins was the best ever at tennis. Bob Ryan, best at basketball. Will McDonough, best at football. So they were really helpful. My job was in the pickup basketball games just to rebound and pass. So I went don't take a shot. But the Globe was very progressive. They made me the first woman to cover the NFL as a beat. And you mentioned how the credentials said no women or children in the press box, which was kind of diminishing. And then they had no provisions for equality after the game. So I did the interviews in the parking lot for 5 years.
And so literally for 5 years, all of the male reporters would get the first cracks at the interviews in the locker room, and you essentially would have to wait in the parking lot and then try to flag them down. Was there anything that when they're helping you? And I'm sure at that point they just want to get in their car and go home, or get on the bus and go home. How did that work?
I had 2 stories, if you want to hear them, that really told you the tenor of the time. One was a game at Three Rivers. The Pittsburgh Steelers were, of course, monumental in the 70s. And then I worked with him and he became a great friend. But Terry Bradshaw came out of the locker room and I'm out there hopping one foot to the other. It's freezing, Three Rivers, and it was late in the day. And I had my notepad and a pen and I went to ask him a question and Terry took my notepad, signed his autograph and walked away. And I said, wait a minute, I'm a reporter. He's like, yeah. That was that. The other side was, they weren't used to a woman reporter, and they'd mostly at that time probably known flight attendants or, I don't know what else, but they were young, mostly single guys. And the Baltimore Colts, of course, had Johnny Unitas. And the guy who followed Johnny Unitas was named Burt Jones, real good-looking guy out of LSU. So the Patriots were playing the Colts, Baltimore then. And after the game out in the parking lot, Burt Jones said to me, hey, you ever been to Baltimore? I'll send you an Eastern shuttle ticket. And I went into my Betty Friedan thing, absolutely not. This is my job. I take it seriously. And he finally brushed my shoulder like this. He said, hey, you're not that great. It was a riot. Miss Alabama was over by his car,
Where did the confidence come from? To be in an environment that is, you're not even allowed in the press box, being a female at that time, which is just so hard to get our arms wrapped around, at this moment in time. But it's amazing, these trails that you blazed. But to do that for the first time, I would find that highly intimidating today as a man, let alone, a female in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah, I had a couple things going for me. One, and maybe you remember this yourself, Dave, when you started in San Diego, is that right?
I did. Thank you for the research.
Yeah, reporter, right? I was going to say, are you calling me from Stuttgart? But I didn't think
That's where my business partners are based. I am. Thank you. That means a lot that you actually did the background on this. That is so nice of you.
We lived in Holland when I was a kid. But when you're young, and maybe you can relate to this, I think you're protected by your innocence. Part of it was I didn't know how hard it was because my passion outweighed the hurdles. And I just was so excited. I'd wanted to be a sports writer since I was 10. I was at the Boston Globe. I was covering the NFL. So that was part of it. And the other part, my family moved a lot when I was a kid. I was born in Boston, but my dad's job took him. We lived in Maryland and Ohio and California. And like I said, in Europe. So when you're new always in a situation, I think you have to rely on some kind of inner spine or something that gets you through whatever that day is.
Develop thick skin. That's an incredible quality. What did your father do and what did your mother do for a living?
My mom was a teacher, which was so great. An English teacher. So we just had books all the time. There were TV shows I never heard of because in my family, mostly, we just had bookshelves and bookshelves. And that was kind of my childhood. And my dad worked for the Stanford Research Institute, which they moved him a lot. He was like a scientific engineering consultant. So by the way, I was the opposite of, that side door scandal they had a few years ago, where kids were pretending to be on the crew and they go to Stanford. My dad would forget it. You're not going to
Varsity Blues. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. So,
that was the name of that. Yeah.
It turned out great going to Boston College because, we are givers. We're not, we do have that Jesuit ethic of you're supposed to do some service or give back. And, Boston was so sports crazy that turned out to be a good fit for me.
At this point, you're writing. You're not really doing any on camera work. And tell me a little bit about how the transition went from the Globe to working at CBS.
I had zero interest in television, and whatever negative is, right? In Alice in Wonderland, she went back into negative numbers. TV for me growing up was ironically Walter Cronkite. Of course, CBS, when we were the Tiffany network, he was our guy, right? He was the face of the network. So he was a great sailor. His background, like mine, Dutch, they're all sailors. And he had a boat in Martha's Vineyard called On Assignment. And occasionally, not very often, but occasionally, he just didn't want to come in on Monday, to do the evening news. And so it would be like, hello, I'm Diane Sawyer. I'm filling in for Walter Cronkite, who's on assignment. Isn't that fantastic?
On assignment sailing. Good for him. He had earned it at that point.
No, he was really. And that was when I started at CBS. I mean, I met Bill Paley, and I remember, of course, you're probably familiar with our great broadcaster, Greg Gumbel, who we lost last year. But it was at one of the upfronts, and Bill Paley was in a wheelchair by then. But, I met him, and he said, I enjoy your work, which was, like Moses on the Mount, right? Saying, and
quite the endorsement.
I was truly flabbergasted. I didn't know what to say, and I was giving it the Three Stooges, humana thing. And finally, Greg Gumbel came over and he just whispered, just say thank you.
That's great advice. I had a mentor of mine always saying, leave them wanting more, which was his version of just, keep it tight.
Our version of that is, leave them laughing when you go.
Oh, I like that too.
Humor. I mean, not everybody has it, but humor's key.
So how did you get the gig at CBS?
Like I said, I had no interest in television. I loved, I am a writer at heart. I think that's why I've lasted all these years, because I have a vocabulary and I read other things and I can make analogies. But CBS came to me, the great Ted Shaker, who was the executive producer of CBS Sports. And he came to me and he said, Lesley, we had a great woman who knew TV, meaning Phyllis George, who was a great friend of mine, but she didn't know sports. And this time we want to hire someone who knows sports and will teach you the TV. And honestly, Dave, I don't know about your first days, but again, I didn't get to go to a small market, right? Just like at the Globe. I went right to the Globe. Now I'm right at CBS when there were only 3 networks. So,
we're not talking CBS Boston. We're talking CBS Network.
Yeah, the network. And
that's unbelievable. It's almost unheard of.
Yeah, it was nuts. And I said, gee, Ted Shaker, I really love writing for the Globe. I wanted to be a sports writer. And he looked kind of stunned. He said, Lesley, there are only 20 of these jobs. So I was like, good enough for me.
Did they get you on-screen training and coaching, talent coaching? They just put you in front of a camera?
And you know what? The good thing was I knew all the sports. I mean, CBS had the NBA, they had the NFL, they had the Final Four. So I had covered the World Series. I'd covered every single thing that they had. So I thought to myself, well, instead of writing on Deadline, I'll speak on Deadline. But I have to tell you, Dave, one of my first, 1984, I did the iconic Celtic Laker series, only like the most, insane. But I also had done tennis because of Bud Collins. I did a lot of Wimbledons and U.S. Opens. And I remember Brent Musburger, I guess, was our host then. And he threw it out to me and I was with Chris Everett. And honestly, I looked like I had rigor mortis. I mean, I took the mic and I did it, Chris Everett. So Chris, in the second set, and you could tell she just looked at me like, Lesley, what is wrong with you? So...
That has got to be, though, what a shock to the system. I mean, writing for the Globe and obviously high pressure and everything that you had to endure in terms of, being able to get in front of the athletes, but to all of a sudden go from that and thrown into worldwide events like Wimbledon and on network television with no formal media training is absolutely remarkable. What a meteoric rise. Was there any animosity in the building, or was there jealousy that, here's someone who came from a print background and all of a sudden gets this coveted position? Did you have to deal with any politics?
Well, I think the people, because CBS was the same thing. By the time they got to CBS Network, they were enormously accomplished. But I'm sure it was out there with all the local sports anchors who didn't get the job.
Right.
Like Brent was, of course, in Chicago and LA, but he had come from print. So that was an advocate for me. He was a sports writer in Chicago, but Jim Nantz came from an affiliate in Salt Lake. And so I'm sure out there we're like, who or what is that?
At that moment, when you're now doing these national live network hits and you're at Wimbledon and these national or worldwide events, is there a moment where you're like, I've really made it? Or are you still in that naive space where you're just like, or did you feel the pressure?
A lot of it, my friends always told me I had that Diane Keaton la-di-da approach, but I think I knew what the words were and I knew the questions to ask. And so, and then it just got easier being, it's like a muscle, right? It got easier being on TV. I will tell you, when I think you mentioned I'm still the only woman ever to present the Lombardi Trophy. I remember being in the production meeting. I mean, you can imagine what they're like for a Super Bowl, right? It goes all around the world and quite a few people. It's the biggest thing a network does. Well, except in Olympics or maybe NFL, maybe it's bigger. But we were sitting there and Ted Shaker, the gentleman I mentioned, said, okay, now let's talk about the post game. So it's embarrassing to even repeat. We're going to have Lesley Visser present the Lombardi Trophy. Now, Terry Bradshaw is sitting there, and Brent Musburger is sitting there, and Greg Gumbel is sitting there, and Jim Nantz, and everybody wanted me to. Our mouths were like, what? But
you could have given Terry Bradshaw your autograph at that moment.
Later, because I worked with him quite a bit, he said, my autograph was worth so much more than whatever crap you were going to put in the Boston Globe.
So you're juggling Boston Globe plus doing CBS Sports for a few years. So I can only imagine you're on the road all the time. You're trying to put your columns together, just trying to do really two full-time jobs. And then you transition after about 4 years of juggling to go full-time with CBS Sports. What was the reason behind that decision? And was it hard for you to give up journalism, which is really, what you loved and not being able to be the writer that you were at such a prestigious paper at the Globe?
Yeah, it was, a decision that I felt comfortable then in TV. And we did do big features back then, like you mentioned. I mean, they sent me The Fall of the Berlin Wall, and that was to see how sports would change in East Germany. Remember Katharina Witt, the beautiful face of socialism? So I got to go through Checkpoint Charlie into East Berlin. And, and at that time, it was like The Wizard of Oz. It was like going from color to black and white over just a 20-yard passage. Or I did stories. I went back with Martina the first time she'd been back to Prague since she defected. At that time, if a person from a communist country defected, you were considered a non-person. So at that time, Czechoslovakia had not written one word of her 5 straight Wimbledon titles. And she was protected by the U.S. because it was under the Federation Cup, like the Davis Cup. So, she was protected by the United States, but she had not been back since 1975 when she defected.
Well, I did not realize that. So they effectively disowned her as a nation.
Non-person. So, like now the job I've had gives you some similar opportunities. I was asked by Anthony Blinken, our Secretary of State, to speak to women, this is a couple of years ago, in Uzbekistan, which it borders Afghanistan. I mean, it is up there in central, it's, of course, was a Russian, they still had a Russian puppet president.
Right.
they wanted me to speak to women's groups. And it was so brave of the embassy. The number one issue for women in Uzbekistan at that time was domestic abuse. There was no law against it. So the embassy in Tashkent sponsored self-defense classes for women. And they couldn't even, they had a waiting list of like 1,000 women.
And it allowed you these assignments to really kind of stretch your journalistic career, it sounds like. And it went beyond sports. And as you do think about it, the politics in sports from the 84 Olympics, where was the Iranian, where the Israeli?
Well, it was, in 80, we had boycotted because Russia invaded Afghanistan. But then I covered the pay for, what they call it, the bribery in Salt Lake before we were awarded those games. So, yeah, I mean, I think, all those people started as sportscasters. Dan Rather and Walter Cronkite, Ronald Reagan. If you can cover sports, you can really cover anything.
It's really, those are hard-hitting news stories. How did you approach that differently than covering the Super Bowl, when there was more? I mean, the Super Bowl is obviously a massive, massive event, but it tends to be very focused on the players and the teams, where there's not the same political angle to it or the political seriousness to it. So how did you approach those differently?
I do think I'm a sports journalist, whether it's a game or a scandal or, whatever, but I'd had those muscles from the Boston Globe. And when you said how I was out there in the parking lot for all those years, that really honed my ability to report, because I wasn't able to listen to other people's questions, or in that sense, or maybe I'm just a ridiculous optimist, but I think
I hadn't even thought about that. But not only were you freezing in the parking lot, but you had to, you could not parrot what other reporters were saying. You had to come up with all of your own questions and content. That was a wonderful byproduct of that experience.
All the women, I mean, you can imagine, I'm so thrilled at the number of women now who do this, having been basically ground zero. And one of the things I told them all is the sidelines, you're freezing. I mean, you're in Chicago or you're in Green Bay. I mean, Kansas City, those places are cold. So one of the assistant coaches had said to me, the way they keep their feet warm, which still works today if you're ever in a really cold environment, is they do sock, baggy, sock. One time, I don't know if I had the privilege of, I traveled with John Madden on his bus for like 5 years. And so one time in Lambeau, I bought these big, hunting socks where you have a D battery, big, huge D battery.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
And they're hanging out the back. And because, in that role, you have to be on the field pretty early. So like by the first quarter, the battery went dead. And John Madden on the air, because I'm clumping around, with this thing hanging. And he said, that is the most pathetic thing I've ever seen.
Let's delve in quickly. I did not realize that you traveled with John Madden on his bus. John Madden very famously refused to fly. So he would go across the country to wherever the next game was on a bus. And it was actually made for great television because he would stop by all these little towns and so forth along the way. But I didn't know that you went on the bus with him. What was that like?
Oh, yeah. No, he became one of my best friends. As a matter of fact, at his memorial, there were 5 speakers, and I was asked to be one of them. It was like Andy Reid, Steve Mariucci. I was great friends with him, not good, great friends. But a couple things. One, people forget that he flew with the Raiders. Of course he did, right? People forget
That's right.
So what changed for him was the claustrophobia of having to sit with a seatbelt on. So that's what he couldn't take. He didn't like being confined like that. I think he did something with Dolly Parton or something and saw her rock star bus. So he made one of those, the Madden Cruiser, to his own, and it had screens and, and he had these rules like wheels up at 10 a.m. At that time, I lived on the east side of New York. He lived in the Dakota. Remember the famous where John Lennon?
Where John Lennon,
And John used to kick the soccer ball around with Julian Lennon. Sometimes when I'd watch Monday Night Football over there.
No way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everybody.
You're at the Dakota watching football with John Madden and Julian Lennon is
great, like and on the bus. No, I know it was crazy.
What a surreal.
No, it was surreal. On the bus, John, I remember one whole trip, he insisted that I learn to diagram the then Washington Redskins counter tray. They had a famous play. And so, it's got the guard pulling. It's got John Riggins goes one way. The guard goes this way, follows the tight end. And the first time I tried to diagram it by myself, we're just riding along through Utah on our way to a 49er game. And I was really proud. I thought I had everybody in the right place. And John looked down and he said, I don't think that play has ever been seen in the history of the NFL. He was like a modern Mark Twain. Honestly, we'd be riding. And like you said, he had the same restaurants. Like we'd leave Dallas, go through El Paso, stop at Chewy's. That was his favorite restaurant, Mexican restaurant. But John would just look out the window and I don't know, out of nowhere, John would say, dark chocolate. I don't get it. It's like they got halfway to milk and quit. No context. Out of nowhere.
I mean, how fun is that? I mean, you could write a whole book just on traveling on his bus around the country. And what would you be spending your time doing? Were you prepping? What were you doing when you guys were rolling through these different states? I'm sure a good part of it you were sleeping in the overnight hours because this bus is moving 24/7 unless you're stopping to eat or something. Yeah.
It was all kinds of things. A lot of it he would be looking at film, which was great for me because I'm going to the same game and he'd break down the film, watch for this linebacker and this formation. Or if he saw, I'm not kidding, if he saw lights on somewhere in Nebraska and it was a girls' softball game, we'd just pull over and watch it. He spent one Christmas I was married to the great Dick Stockton then, and we lived in Florida, and John had a game, must have been a Giants game, and then a Dolphin game, so he didn't want to go all the way back to California, so he came down and spent Christmas with my family, and you should have seen when that Madden Cruiser pulled up the street.
It was like crazy. A rock stars.
It was. And then when he got off the bus, I never took a second for granted. Not one.
What amazing stories. How much do you have to prep ahead of a game in terms of studying the teams and the players? You said going through film with John. What else would you do so you were ready? I've always been so impressed. I've never done sports, but you won a Vince Scully award, and I grew up listening to Vince Scully and just his knowledge of the game and the players of the game. So how much of it did you just know from knowing football? And then how much would you dive in if you knew there was a matchup that you were going to next and you would study those teams?
That's a great question. One thing for your listeners, the next time they're watching a CBS game, Tracy Wolfson, who's our great sideline reporter, she makes, and this was pretty typical, 50 index cards for every game, which I did too, to get on maybe 3 times. You don't know what you're going to need. Maybe there was a stat about a guy who got hurt from, maybe he was hurt last year with the same injury, whatever it is. You have prepared all that. And then you do know it. I mean, you know what you're looking at. And the other thing that's so cool for anyone who watches one of our CBS games, our number 2 crew has a female director, Suzanne Smith. She is the only, matter of fact, I hope you guys honor her sometime. She is the only female director of NFL games. She did the AFC Championship 2 years ago, Suzanne Smith. Guys are maybe sitting there in their basement, oh, women know nothing. She's the one saying, she's got 24 cameras, ready 16, take 4.
Amazing. And having to switch on it, I've gotten to watch that a few times, and it is remarkable to see that kind of production. I don't think most people realize. I only know a fraction of it. I've just been fortunate to be able to see a little bit. It is a spaceship. It's unbelievable. Let's talk about, obviously we're talking a lot about NFL, the NFL. You're part of NFL Today. You're contributing along with Greg Gumbel, Terry Bradshaw, Pat O'Brien. What was it like, A, being the only female in the group, but B, being their junior in terms of, here are real established sportscasters. Was that intimidating, or was that something that you at that point now felt like you really had the experience, or were you still a bit in a naive mode?
Those guys were great to me. And maybe I positioned myself in this way because it worked for me at the Globe. I mean, they would tease me all the time. Like one time I had a hip replacement and I came back. I missed a few weeks and I came back on the air, and Greg Gumbel had been really close to the Rolling Stones, like to the point where they one time asked Greg, what should their playlist be?
Are you serious? Really?
Yep. Really, particularly close to Chuck Leavell, the keyboard. So I came back, and I think Greg's favorite song was Sympathy for the Devil or something. So now we're on the air. They welcome me back, and I start singing, please allow me to introduce myself. And Greg goes like this, like the 1940s. What? Oh, sorry. We have to go to commercial. And then he said, the thanks of a grateful nation. So I was like kicking him under the table, it was like.
But that's fun. It sounds like you're a lot of fun to work with. You've got a great sense of humor. CBS, they lose the NFL broadcast rights. And so you guys move to ABC/ESPN. When something like that happens of that magnitude and you lose the NFL, was it a foregone conclusion that you were going to move to, or is that a whole rehiring process? How does that work?
No one knew what was going to happen. We found out at the NFC Championship down in Dallas that it was a done deal, and I mean, people didn't know Fox. It was Fox Sport. That's what everybody called it. I mean, they got the NFL, and for CBS to lose it, having gone all the way back, even before the Ice Bowl, I mean, CBS had the NFL for 50 years. And it was really traumatic for all of us down in Dallas. And people had no idea. Now, you could have stayed, like Jim Nance stayed. And I've covered 40 Final Fours myself. I love the Final Four. But Jim stayed because he had the Final Four and the Masters. And then we got the NFL back. I went back to CBS when we got the NFL back. Most people went to Fox, quite a few people. Dick Stockton went, John Madden went, Pat Summerall went, quite a few people, producers and directors, because the NFL, that was really the strength of what we did for a living. I went to ABC, and they said they'd make me the first woman on Monday Night Football. So that turned out great for me. And I got to cover the Triple Crown and figure skating around the world with the perfect Peggy Fleming. Everything everyone loved about her, watching her. She's a perfect person. Yeah, so that actually worked out great for me.
And at this point, obviously, this is when you get to be the first time to report from the sideline from the Super Bowl. What is that magnitude? Doing Monday night and Sunday night and big nationally televised games is obviously a big deal. But now you're on this world stage with, what is it, over 1 billion viewers or something? It's a gigantic number. When you add up the worldwide views. Tell me about the pressure and how was that decision made?
You know what? I knew I knew how to do it. I'd done it for 1 million sports. By then I'd probably done 15 Final Fours, kinds of things. At that time, I would interview the coach of one of the teams before kickoff on the 50-yard line, which, and that goes out, like you said. So my former husband, Dick, used to tease me that you are big in the Pacific Rim. Because we get all this crazy fan mail, from.
Would you really?
Yeah, really, you're big in the Pacific Rim. I felt qualified, I guess. And it's quite an adrenaline. I tell people I don't have $1 billion, but I've had $1 billion life.
It's a great saying. How many days were you on the road a year at this point in your life as you're covering all these different events?
Well, people would ask me, where do you live? And I'd say, baggage claim. A lot. But I loved it, I loved it. I even liked airplane food.
You returned in 2000 to CBS Sports, and you're now continue to cover the NFL, but NCAA, and also the Olympics. Tell me a little bit about covering the Olympics and what goes into that.
Yeah,
because the Olympics are obviously every 4 years, but there are all these sports that we candidly don't follow that much around the rest of the rest of the year. It's not like football or baseball where there's a regular season. Who's following fencing or, swimming and so forth. So I'd love to know more about how you prep for something like that and how you learn to call those different sports.
CBS, we don't have the Olympics anymore, ever since NBC came in. And before that, before CBS got into it, it had been NBC. But I covered a few of them for the Globe before I went. And CBS, you're right. It's like, you know nothing about the venue. You get assigned a venue. One Olympics, I had bobsled and luge. Okay. And so the guy I worked with, Sean McDonough, legendary sportscaster, we used to get up every day and say, snooze you luge. We do nothing. But it's just kind of like anything else, you just apply yourself. So you're off in your venue, like you're up in the mountains for a month with I never saw people from doing the downhill or doing the skating. I was just up in wherever the venue was in the mountains. And it was crazy because Prince Albert of Monaco, he was on the Monaco team, and he was just like Al. He'd say, "Hi, Al Grimaldi." That's how he'd introduce himself. So he just hung out with Al Grimaldi for like a month.
Do you guys live in the Olympic Village like the athletes do, or where do you guys stay?
No, you're up in your venue, which they are too. They don't, people like bobsledders, they don't go down to the village every day and come back up.
I see. Okay. So there's accommodations for them in the various locations. And
correct.
I gotcha.
I was the first woman ever to go down the Olympic bobsled.
Get out. Are you serious?
I was, because do you remember Herschel Walker? Remember that player?
Yeah, of course. Football player. Yeah.
And he was on the 92 team in Albertville, the U.S. team. And so I'd covered him a million times, right? And
Herschel Walker was a bobsledder?
Oh, yeah, because they would get a sprinter for the push. For the fourth man.
I did not realize that. That's crazy.
I think Ronaldo Nehemiah might have been one, but that was just a speed position. He said, "Why don't you come down with us?" And I thought, hey, why not? But it was so complicated because they didn't think a woman's trap muscles were strong enough to withstand the G-forces, are quite severe. So I had to get permission from our head of the Olympic Games, Dr. Harvey Schiller, from Jean-Claude Killy. I don't know if you remember the great skater. He was
Sure.
or skier. He was the president of the games in France because they didn't want any insurance liability. But yeah, I went down, and it reminded me of that Bob Seger song, "I Wish I Didn't Know Now What I Didn't Know Then." It was nuts.
What did you get sick at all? I've heard that the G forces, much like going on a jet fighter, people sometimes will pass out or they'll get nauseous. Did that happen to you?
Well, the tough thing about it, I weigh about 124 pounds, and they go down. It's like a tin can, and it's going more than 100 miles an hour, and it goes up on the ice and comes back. And it just was, I was too shocked to be frightened. But it's nothing I would recommend. And also for them, it was a free run down the ice, right, for the American team. So they weren't. But I was the third man in a 4-man bob, and they said, just don't lift your head up.
What a gripping experience that had to have been. You're the first person I've ever met to go down on a bobsled. That is absolutely amazing. In 2000, you start to receive your one of many, many awards, and we'll get into several more, but you get the Pete Rozelle Radio and Television Award from the Pro Football Hall of Fame for your contributions to football broadcasting. To start at, obviously at the school paper, and then to go work at the Globe and literally get your national gig. And, 25, not even 25 years later, you're getting acknowledged by the Pro Football Hall of Fame from parking lots to the Hall of Fame. What was that like?
It was so, when they called me up, I remember saying, you can't take it back. You can't say you dialed the wrong number. It was so astonishing to me. And the class I went in with they were the highest achievers. It was Troy Aikman and Reggie White and Warren Moon, the first black quarterback, and not first, but first to get to have a major career in the United States, and John Madden and myself. So it was just like, what?
That is absolutely remarkable. Obviously, well-deserved. And then a little bit later that year, you also receive a Sports Emmy Lifetime Achievement Award. And you're still so young, and to accomplish as much as you had already at that young age is truly remarkable. Was that also, I'm sure, a pinch me moment?
Yeah, I was the first woman for both of them. And when I received the award, which was in New York, I asked all the women who worked in sports business to stand with me and that we would celebrate this together, because I know the distance women have come, women still have to go. So yeah, that was very, very meaningful to me.
That's incredibly cool and touching. I want to talk a little bit of all the events that you've gotten to cover. Do you have a favorite one that they all sound amazing, by the way, but if you had to pick one, what would you pick?
My favorite day of the year in sports is the semifinal of the Final Four, because where'd you go to school?
I went to a Catholic Jesuit school like you. I went to the University of San Diego.
San Diego. Great tradition.
Yeah.
Is that Marshall Falk went, or did he go to San Diego State?
He went to SDSU. Harbaugh, I can't remember which one. I think it's Jim. He coached the Toreros.
Correct.
Yeah.
I got stories there. The arenas are full. It's March Madness. It is accurately described. And by the time you get to the Final Four, those four schools think they have a chance, and they do. And it's really raucous, and it's kids, and you see painful moments from kids. You see heroic moments. And I think my favorite one was all the way back to 1985 when Villanova beat Georgetown. Georgetown, they were Secretariat. They were the defending champions. They had Patrick Ewing. They had like 4 pros on the team. And Villanova barely got in the tournament. And Rolly Massimino was like a legendary coach everybody loved. But they were not afraid of Georgetown because a lot of the same kids came from New York. They played pickup in the summer. They knew each other. And Rolly told his team, you are going to have to play a perfect game to beat Georgetown. And they damn near did. They missed one shot in the second half. And it was kind of everything sports could be.
Oh, I love that drama. What a great story.
The NCAA tournament of any event, it always delivers on its promise. Always. Any year. Pick any year. And it does.
And it's really been fun to see that grow over the years and what a national event that's become. I got to watch Vin Scully several years ago speak, and someone had asked him, do you ever get nervous? And, this is several years back, but I think maybe the question was like, when was it that you would be the most nervous? And he told a story about when President Reagan was in office, that President Reagan, on numerous occasions, would call into the listen line. Someone from the White House would call into the listen line while he was in the White House and basically listen to Vin call the Dodger games down the phone line. And an engineer or producer would whisper in Vin's ear that the president was listening and listening to him call the game. And that's when Vin said he would be the most nervous. And you know that the president's listening. Did you, in all these different things that you've done, did you ever have a moment where you're just like, I am really nervous?
Oh, many, many moments. The first time I interviewed Michael Jordan, it was a post game and it was on the air. And I guess because I was young covering the Celtics, I knew Larry Bird, a little bit by then. He didn't make me so nervous, but Michael Jordan did. And I used to think to myself, because I'm a child of the Celtics, that Bill Russell, the great Bill Russell, who the trophy is named after, right? The MVP.
Sure.
He won 11 titles, greatest decorated sports champion in our history. 2 titles at our fellow Jesuit school, University of San Francisco, Olympic gold, and all those Celtic titles. And he used to throw up before playoff games. So I used to say to myself, hey, if nerves are good enough for Bill Russell, they're good enough for me.
That's a great, I'm going to steal that.
Oh, yeah, you got me through a lot of moments.
Tell me a little bit about your day-to-day now, because you continue to work with CBS and other outlets. What are you doing day-to-day, and what do you enjoy doing the most now?
Oh, thanks for asking. I don't do any sidelines anymore. I just do a few features, but I just came back from Paris. I know. How's that for a sentence? There was a doubleheader women's game in Paris, which usually kicks off the college basketball season. Those are the first couple of games. And one of the teams was Duke, who's coached by a woman named Kara Lawson, and she was just named our Olympic coach. So I went over and, sat down with her and just talked about, we haven't lost since 92 and we've won 8 of 10 gold medals. So there's a lot of pressure on a young a young coach. But I just do features now, and everybody's a story. I feel like Charles Kuralt. It's like anybody you talk to is a story. So I'm thrilled.
You've obviously broken down so many barriers for women sportscasters and journalists, but I would argue that you've also been a tremendous force to women's sports being recognized at a completely different level from where it was when you first started. And you look at how the women's tennis versus men's tennis and all the struggles that Billie Jean King went through, or look at the WNBA, how big they've become, and women's soccer. And I think you've absolutely been a force in getting women's sports the attention and the notoriety that it deserves.
Well, I've known Billie Jean, who's now a good friend. I've known her since about 1973 or 4. And I remember the first time I covered her, she played in a converted airplane hangar in Boston. And, the guy reporters, they weren't, but a couple of them were there. And they kept asking Billie Jean whether her brother, remember his great pitcher with the Giants, Randy Moffett? And they kept asking Billie Jean, was Randy going to sign again with the Giants? I'm like, she won Wimbledon. What kind of what is going on here? But I think what happened, the female athletes in this country really came of age in the 96 Olympics in Atlanta. Those were the Title IX babies, which Billie fought, she and Donna DeVerona. They fought so hard. They pounded those halls of Congress to get it passed. And, we won at those 96 games, soccer and basketball and volleyball, everything. So that was really, and now since then, there are 2 more generations where now young women absolutely grow up thinking, I'm going to play pro ball.
That's incredible.
I love it.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. From not being allowed into the locker room to seeing women's sports evolve and turn into what it is now is truly a testament, large part, I think, to you and what other women such as yourself have done.
I work on a show on CBS called We Need to Talk. It is hosted, produced, and directed by women. And these are some of them. Now, these were really forces for change. Lisa Lesley, you've probably come across her in your years. 4 gold medals. She absolutely played at SC and is just a giant. She belongs on Mount Rushmore, and Swin Cash and Renee Montgomery and Dara Torres. We just have Olympic greats everywhere you look.
Tell me mentors, and I know you've had maybe John Madden. I know you've had several, but what is something that a mentor is taught you that you can pass on and share with someone else as a great piece of advice?
I would say I learned the most from coaches. And the guys I work with were great at the Globe and at CBS, but coaches are just in a different position. And I remember Mike Krzyzewski, who I think I covered all 10 of his Final Fours, the great Duke coach. And one time I said to him, how does this happen? It's so hard to get to one Final Four, let alone 100 of them like he did. And he'd gone to West Point. He played for Bob Knight at West Point. I said, what is it? And he said, at West Point, we learned 3 things. You don't lie, you don't cheat, and you don't cut corners.
It's a great piece of advice. Obviously, you and I are products of legacy media, television, print, radio, myself. We're struggling in, as an industry. There's certainly been some challenges. What would be your advice for young people that are looking to get into television, journalism, radio?
It's going to sound crazy coming from a journalist, and I'd like to know what you think the impact is on radio. But I think you have to embrace some of AI because, AI can't replace you into that microphone. It can't replace me for what I see on a sideline or smell on a sideline or feel on a sideline. It can't replace that, but it can be a tool to get you out of a jam or something where you're stuck. But I'd like to know from you, what do you think the effect will be?
I think that's really well put. I was thinking back to when you were, prepping to be on a sideline or, prepping to interview a coach. So much of that legwork that you had to do and the research that you had to do ahead of that, is much easier to do today because of AI, because of the internet. You still have to fact check it, and you certainly still have to dig in because
I've caught them in things. And now it's almost like they feel you, AI. And I'll say, no, that's not right. It wasn't that Olympic. And they'll write, oh, yes, Lesley, bad on my part.
It's like apologetic. And you're like, it's okay, AI. It helps us, here with script writing. We do a lot of commercial production, a lot of show prep. And so it's a good starting point. There's no doubt that, we do apply it. But to your point, I think that the human connection is so incredibly important. And I think that's why sports or entertainment.
I saw that you have something like 2,500 relationships around the world, some ridiculous thing. And unless I missed by 2 zeros.
And Lesley means I don't have we have clients, yes, not relationships, but
But doesn't it mean that you have had to form relationships constantly?
Oh, for sure. That's honestly, I love that part in learning from, people such as yourself. This is a true treat, but learning from people all over the world. And I know when we first met via email a couple months ago, and we were writing back and forth trying to get today scheduled, and you're on the road still a tremendous amount. You're on your way to London when I was talking to you last, and I think I was on my way to Dallas, if I recall. But I really enjoy that. I enjoy meeting people, connecting with people. And I think that goes back to your AI question. I know there's a lot of fear about AI. And I think some of that is warranted, but I do believe the human connection that we all crave is still paramount and is always going to be important, whether that's through communicating and in person or watching your favorite football broadcast or going to a game and being part of that tribe. That will, in my opinion, continue to thrive. And you look at sports, and sports has actually been the one part of print, television, radio that has really withstood the audience erosion that, has impacted a lot of other parts. Sports continues to grow and grow every single year. And I'm so impressed with the showmanship and what, it's obviously a game first and foremost, but you go to these events and they are truly events now. And that's exciting.
Yeah, they're immersive. I think that's because sports is one of the only places, or what you do live on the radio, that's unscripted. Everything else in life is scripted, right? But you don't know what's going to happen at a sporting event. And it constantly reminds us of that you just don't know. Okay, wait, before we go, I have a bonus question for you.
Okay. All right.
This is one of the Stephen Colbert questionnaire.
Okay.
If you had to listen to one song on a loop, let's say you just had to, for like a day, what would it be?
This is an easy one for me. I love In Excess, my favorite. They're an Australian band. Michael Hutchence, unfortunately, passed away years ago, but my favorite song, it was actually filmed in Prague, which you spoke about before. The video was shot in Prague, and it's Never Tear Us Apart by In Excess.
Oh, that's a great choice.
How about you?
When I was asked this, I said Summer Wind by Sinatra.
Oh, that's a beautiful song.
To the Summer Wind. I love that song. I could listen to that a lot.
What would you like to be remembered for?
A couple things. That I was a good kid and that I helped a lot of younger women.
I think it's safe to say that both of those things are 100% true. Did your parents get to see you have the success?
Yeah, my mom had been a sports fan, which was unusual, for her. She grew up in the Berkshires and so the Celtics, when Dick and I, Stockton, got married, Bill Russell and Red Auerbach came to our wedding. My mother almost passed out. In fact, everybody at the wedding, they could care less about Dick and me. It's like, oh my God, there's Bill Russell by the shrimp bowl. It was ridiculous. But my dad didn't really get it. The Dutch, they're speed skaters. He was proud of me, but I don't think he really got it. I think he would have preferred if I'd been a war correspondent. That to him would have been, especially the way I grew up.
Lesley, what you've accomplished is truly remarkable. You are not only a force of nature and a trailblazer, but just a wonderful human being. And I am so grateful for everything you've done and so grateful for you taking the time to do this. This has been just a true honor and pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Chachi Loves Everybody. If you like the show, we hope you'll leave us a 5-star rating and tell your friends. Make sure to follow on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This has been a Benztown McVeigh podcast production. Hosted and researched by Dave Chachi Dennis. Engineered by Darren Silva. Produced and edited by Jake Urbanik. Show coordinator Suzanne Aksu and Robbie Gessel.